Hello, I'm Michael Chigani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is James To. James, you were a legislator, but you resigned. There was a mass resignation, but you're still a district council member. You're a member of the Democratic Party. And if I remember correctly, you're the longest serving legislative councillor, right? Until your resignation. Now, so many things have happened in the past few weeks. Joshua Wong is in jail. The Democratic Party member Ted Hui is in exile. Jimmy Lai has been denied bail, and no opposition legislative councillors in LegCo. Is it the end of the opposition in Hong Kong?
I think it's the end of the one country, two system. Well, one country, two system rests upon the patience and endurance from Beijing, because China is a big country and Hong Kong is a small place. And if they lost their patience and they chose to end the one country, two system, then of course there's nothing
but then is
that Hong
it
Kong
also
can do.
the end of the opposition?
Well, it's not just the end of opposition.
But there is no opposition in LegCo. A lot of them have left Hong Kong. A lot of them are in jail. A lot of them have been arrested.
Well, you talk about end of opposition is just downplaying the horrible situation of Hong Kong. Well, I would say this is the end of the one country, two system.
Tell me why you think it's the end of one country, two systems. Because the government insists and Beijing insists that one country, two systems is very much alive.
Well, if you compare, say, the freedom level of Hong Kong and Beijing and Shanghai, I think now Hong Kong is just another city, a Chinese city.
But we still have more freedom. I mean, you're here talking with me.
Well, but once the national security law is in place, I think Hong Kong is just a city without freedom. And the police just like the military curfew forces, and they just arrest anybody and just coin up a charge, and then they will freeze your account. And that's the situation of Hong Kong.
Well, Ted Hui, a member of the Democratic Party, but he resigned from the party. He has now gone into exile in Europe. Now, his bank account was frozen, and then part of it was unfrozen. And the police claimed that the money was used for money laundering. He had used crowdfunding to help people who had been arrested during last year's protest. But the money was put in a legal firm. So how can that be money laundering?
That's exactly my question. Because
you're a lawyer, so how can HSBC freeze such an account and then unfroze part of it?
Well, under the national security law, as the police statement has said, they have power to freeze any account. And if they choose to give a notice to HSBC or Bank of China, well, of course the bank will obey.
Is that legally possible? Shouldn't the bank say, well, why should we freeze it?
Well, what you can ask is whether it's a formal order or formal notice. Mm-hmm. If there's a formal notice, then the police will say they will no longer want to disclose the national secret to you. And that what the bank can do is to obey. Also, that is the situation of Hong Kong. No asset, no person will be safe now.
Well, no person will be safe now. That is the sweeping statement. But then HSBC did eventually unfreeze part of the money.
Well, so that's why they have the duty to explain why one day you can freeze a person's account, or no, not just the person in exile, but even the parents or the wife. And another day it's unfrozen, unfreeze. I don't know what's going on. But that's reflect the very chaotic order of situation of Hong Kong.
Now, the police commissioner said, James, that Ted Hui was a disgrace to himself and others, and had hurt young people who followed him, but then he ran away and gone into exile, that he had no conscience. Do you agree with that?
Well,
I mean, Ted Hui was a member of your party. Why did he leave?
Well, what I talked to many people in Hong Kong, among my friends and even among those so-called the pro-establishment guy, many people do want to leave. They want to play safe, they want to leave. the freedom level that they are expecting is failing them. And therefore, it's a painful decision, not just for Ted Hui, but many Hong Kong people.
But that was not the point. The point made by the police commissioner was that Ted Hui was at the forefront, inspiring young people to protest, and then these people have been arrested. Some of them will be in jail, but he himself left.
Well, I see the Facebook of Ted Hui when he formally announced the exile decision. I only see many Hong Kong people, including many young, allege themselves to be a youngster involved in the movement, just congratulate Ted Hui's very brave decision to leave.
Now you have not.
They are not talking about, oh, you.
You're a coward.
No, you're a coward. No, they are not saying. They said your decision is right.
Now you have not been charged with anything yet, right?
Well, that's
but
they can come at any time.
And that's why I want to ask you, if you think they can come at any time, you have not been charged, so you can leave Hong Kong now. You still have your passport, right? Do you plan to do that?
That's a painful decision for me and for my family. I have a kid of 9, age of 9, and well, of course, I would think of my family. But I also, at the same time, think of those who cannot leave, which I care most.
But you haven't answered my question, James. Are you considering leaving?
Well, that's why I said I am in a dilemma.
So you have thought about it?
I've thought about it.
You have thought about leaving?
Yes, obviously. Because, well, I want to stay in a place where one country, two systems will be genuinely implemented. But now it ended. Well, just like if you ask me, let's say, after the 50 years promised of one country, two systems, 50 years and a day, whether I will leave at that very day, that's exactly the same question that I'm facing.
So you say you have considered leaving, but you're still here. What made you decide to stay, at least for now?
Well, of course, I have many people that I loved. I have many supporters that they want me to continue to serve them in whatever capacity, not just as a district councillor, but also as a lawyer, helping to solve their problem, a former legislator that know all the public policy that sometimes I would be commenting and urging the government to change the stance.
But your voice is gone. You're no longer a LegCo member.
I know, but you still invite me at least several days after my resignation in this show. So that's why I may have some residual value in the eyes of the media.
Well, tell me this. I won't ask you whether it was right or wrong for Ted Hui to leave, but what I will ask is this. You said that you considered leaving. Do you think there will be a mass exodus from Hong Kong?
Oh, I believe so.
When the BNO kicks in end of next month, you think there will be a lot of people leaving?
Oh, yes, certainly. Well, everybody during the lunch appointment, during this small talk, they all talk about immigrate. They all talk about BNO. They all talk about how to live in foreign place. But at the same time, I care most for those who have no choice but to stay. I care those people most.
Well, Carrie Lam says that the national security law has brought back normality to Hong Kong. In a way, she may be right because there are no more protests and people are going about their lives as usual, except for the coronavirus. So there is some kind of normality in Hong Kong compared to last year. Would you agree with her then?
Well, I think it's a kind of a peace without freedom. It's not a vibrant city anymore. Well, if you remember correctly, that every time during the CE's address, whether Donald Tsang or even C.Y. Leung, they talk about, we have last year we have how many peaceful protests? Well, 10,000 peaceful protests, up to 3 a day. But now, even peaceful protests are banned. We are now living
that's because of the coronavirus. That's what they say.
No, not just that. But they use that as an excuse to ban all the peaceful demonstration. Even those demonstrators are group in 2 or 4, but they still ban.
So you feel that protests can never come back again to Hong Kong, even after the virus pandemic is over?
Well, that depends on Beijing's decision whether to reinstate the genuine one country, two system, whether voluntary or involuntary.
So now when Carrie Lam says normality has been brought back to Hong Kong, do you think that eventually, because she did say in her policy speech that eventually she wants to repair Hong Kong's image, is that possible?
Well, I think it's not all a matter of Beijing's decision. I think it's only a puppet, and he's not of herself. If Beijing decide to reinstate the genuine one country, two system, of course, they will scrap her and ask others to do differently.
Tell me exactly, in 30 seconds, how have we lost one country, two systems? Because it seems like it's still here in some ways.
Okay, I give you several, just very shortly. No peaceful protests were allowed anymore. The media all are well disturbed to an extent that people just feel that no genuine freedom of expression can be exercised. Well, you ask the Reporters Association and the International Rating Agency for press freedom. I think they will give you the conclusion.
Okay, quick break. See you soon. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Up With Me is James To. James To, a former member of the Legislative Council, a member of the Democratic Party, and also a district councillor. Now, before the break, we're talking about, I was asking you how you think that one country, two systems is no more, because some people say it's still here, it's more vibrant than ever, because now we don't have any protests, and the city is peaceful, Legislative Council is functioning properly without people throwing things and so on, and bills are being passed through in a timely manner. But you say, no, we've lost part of our freedom, there are no protests, and the media is afraid. Is that how you define one country, two systems?
Well, also, we have no genuine election. Well, people just can't choose even a limited portion of their candidates that can voice out their opinion.
But people can run, you can run.
No, the point is that they disqualify so many political spectrum candidates that we will not have a genuine reflection of people's voice in the wide political spectrum in LegCo.
Well, okay, you brought up that point. I was going to ask you that. LegCo elections have been delayed until next September. If it takes place, and if people are disqualified, does the opposition, the opposition, including people like you, the traditional opposition, and the young people who are more activist and more radical, there's a split between the two sides, right? Are you going to repair that split and compete in that election, even if people are disqualified?
The point is that whether we will have genuine election in the next several months. I'm very pessimistic.
What do you mean? When you say there are no genuine election, you mean because candidates are being disqualified?
Not just that, but also there may be overseas voting that we cannot trust.
In the Greater Bay Area.
Greater Bay Area, that can be easily manipulated.
Now, you're a district council member and you resigned as a legislative councillor. In September, will you run for LegCo again?
Not likely, unless Beijing will reinstate the genuine one country, two system.
So you won't. So who will compete in the September elections? Will the opposition compete or just stay out of it and accept defeat?
Well, 9 months or 10 months is a long way for politics. And take into account the very chaotic situation of international political world, and even the self-internal assessment of the Beijing's leaders, I think, well, it is too premature to say that, well, whether election will be ongoing, whether our party or pan-Democrats will run the election. I think it's too early to say.
So the Democratic Party has not decided what its next move is?
Well, for Democratic Party, our new leadership has been out yesterday,
a couple of days ago.
And of course, the younger generation may have a different thinking. And I will respect their thinking process and their ultimate decision.
Do you think it's the right thing? For example, you say you may have to reconsider whether you want to run again. Maybe it's better that traditional politicians like you, who've been around for a long time, all of you step aside and let the young people form a new opposition. Would that be the right way to do it?
That's likely to be the way out, especially when the younger generation may have quite a bit of different thinking. But the point is, if they insist to go to the, let's say, more radical position of going for independence of Hong Kong, then maybe the Beijing will use a very strong hand, very high pressure to squeeze them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, instead of, as you say, the younger generation running and forming a new opposition, instead of being very radical and calling for independence and so on, do you think perhaps the right way out of this is that for a new generation of politicians to come forward and accept one country, two systems as defined by Beijing and accept democracy with so-called Chinese characteristics? Is that possible for Hong Kong so that we can return to peace?
Well, I can only say Hong Kong in future has been drawn a red line by Beijing. And, well, if take the example of LegCo, maybe Beijing is thinking about the National People's Congress in Beijing, that the so-called democratic parties are led by the Communist Party to reflect the people's opinion in a limited way.
You know, we didn't get the democracy that the opposition, including yourself, wanted when Beijing offered some kind of democracy that allowed for the chief executive to be directly elected, right? They gave a blueprint for democracy in Hong Kong, which was rejected in LegCo. You voted it down along with others. Will that ever come back again? Now that we've got a national security law, is it time for the central government to say, okay, now here is a new proposal for democracy, shaped similar to the one that was offered in 2014. Would you accept that?
Well, Michael, don't think about the old thing. Now I would say the Beijing would like to reform the electoral college, we reform LegCo election, we reform the constituents of different sectors, whether functional constituency or geographical. They want to absolute control because they feel it is a way to let Hong Kong to have their way of one country, two system, or in an orderly way, but under control.
So do you think the next target could be the district councils? Because, you know, November last year, the district council, the opposition swept the polls, right? And they won almost all the seats in district council. You won your seat as well. So that's still functioning, and it's filled by opposition members. Will that be the next target?
Certainly, it must be the next target. And also different sectors like social workers, school teachers, tertiary education institution professors, media, and including the electronic media KOL. I think they will go against all the people that have a certain function, a certain minute leadership in the society, and they just want to control all of them.
But that's something you're saying that, what evidence do you have that that's the plan? Because the plan now was, the central government said last year's protests were so destructive that they had to have a national security law because the Legislative Council refused to pass Article 23 security law, right? So they imposed that. But you're going a step further by saying they want to control everything. Why would you say that?
Oh, because their so-called white paper for Hong Kong has been out in 2014, and that disclose all their plans, and they do it step by step until now. And even just several days ago, about the 30 years anniversary for implementing the Basic Law, our CCP's highest representative in Hong Kong also uttered the way forward that everything must do in order to control and to reform.
Can Hong Kong people accept that?
Well, it's not a matter of whether you accept or not, because Beijing have military, they have the PLA, they have a sovereign.
But they didn't send the PLA to Hong Kong last year.
Well, but they have these 30,000 police officers just taking orders from Beijing and have a de facto curfew here.
Now, tell me this. Was last year's protest, the throwing of petrol bombs, destruction of property, on reflection in hindsight, was that wrong? Is that what caused what we're now seeing, as you say, the loss of one country, two systems? If they hadn't gone to that extreme last year, maybe this would not have happened.
Well, political action and reaction is not happening in a vacuum. So it's not very good to have a so-called hindsight that something is wrong during that political atmosphere. I think for those who have power, like Beijing is a government, is a strong country, that they should have the plan to restore order, but not to swing, well, even that they are right, even that, take it that they are right, but not swing to the extreme side to the extent that one country, two system actually die.
So you've supported last year's protests?
Well, I can only say people just protest against the mutual offenders rendition ordinance. And if at different times, if the CE has the courage to just abort and to stop there, like in
but she didn't do that
June or July,
yeah, but she waited.
then I think, and those who have the power to make decisions have a more heavy responsibility.
Okay, I've got 10 seconds. The CE, there's some talk that she wants to have another 5 years. Give me your take on that.
I don't think Beijing will be that stupid enough for her to let Beijing down for another term.
All right, okay, thank you very much. See you next time. Good evening.